Hi, guys. This is Gigi from Understanding Us, Africans and the diaspora coming together, trying to understand each other and forming a bond that has been broken from so long ago. I wanted to tell you a story about something that happened so long ago that has prompted me to realize the effect it has had on so many of us, brothers and sisters. I was fortunate enough to visit Jamaica in 1968. At that time, I was 15 years old. My mother took me on a cruise, and I always realized how fortunate I was to have had that experience at such a young age. We visited Port Antonio, Kingston, and Montego Bay. That was the first time I saw a Rastafarian because separate and apart from visiting Jamaica, I had never had any encounter, any read about Rastafarians or anything like that. And so upon my return from my cruise, I was enlightened. I was interested in exploring and learning more about Jamaica. I started listening to the music from there, the reggae music. At some point, I don't know exactly when, I was introduced to Bob Marley. I bought his first album that I was aware of, which was Catch a Fire. It was a vinyl album and it was shaped like a, um, gosh, I'm getting old. It was shaped like a cigarette lighter. Okay, it was very, very creative. And so from having that first experience of that album, I was introduced to Catch a Fire, Concrete Jungle. I think I Shot the Sheriff was on there as well. Okay, so from that point, I was hooked on Bob Marley. Fast forward a few years later, because that was like 1973, when Catch a Fire came out. So in 1976, Bob Marley came to the Washington, D.C. area, and my husband and I went to see the Bob Marley and the Wailers. They were at McDonough Gym, which was the gym on the campus of Georgetown University. And the only downer was that I remember it was in the summer. It was extremely hot in the gym and there was no air conditioning. Plus, they closed the doors, I guess maybe for security reasons or whatever, but it was extremely hot. I remember my son being a baby and it was just very uncomfortable, but the show was excellent. Okay. A few years later, I think it was, let me see, 1978, Bob Marley and the Wailers performed at the Capitol Center, which was a huge arena in the Washington, D.C. area. I think they could hold like 19,000 some people. And I can remember when the tickets first went on sale, trying to get good seats. Even though I was young, I had a job, and that was so important for me to be able to get, seats like on the floor or something like that. Regretfully, I was unable to accomplish that goal because that was before we had cell phones and whatever other devices were used to be able to get good seats. Um, I just didn't have access to that. And so when we got to the show, I was so shocked to see on the floor nothing but white folks, nothing but white folks. They had all the good seats. I was disappointed. I was disappointed. I mean, it wasn't that I don't hate any particular race, but and at that time I wasn't thinking about what I'm thinking now. Uh, that they had the opportunity, they had whatever tools were needed to be able to get all these seats. They had them all. And I forgot about that. Years have gone by, 30, 40 years or whatever. But I remember watching a documentary on Bob Marley, and someone in Bob Marley's camp made the comment that before Bob Marley passed, he was so sad and disappointed that Black Americans, African Americans, were not interested. They were not so interested in his music. Okay. That really hurt me. That hurt me, really hurt me to my soul because that was not true. Not at all. When he performed at the Capitol Center, for one, I guess all he saw were white people because they were in the prime seats. I don't know. I assumed that there were blacks other than myself there. I don't remember that part, but I do know that if Bob Marley and the Wailers were on the stage performing, they would not have been able to see the black folks who could possibly have been up, way up, okay? The seats that the what do they call them? The bleeding seats or nosebleed seats or whatever like that. And so Bob Marley left this world, according to the guy from his camp. I can't think of his name, but Bob Marley left this world believing that that African Americans were not into his music. That was so far from the truth. Now, lots of African Americans may not have been afforded the opportunity to travel to Jamaica, where you get like a firsthand feel, taste of the reggae music. I'm not saying that all African Americans were into reggae and Bob Marley, but a lot of them were, and he was not aware of that. I was because I was into it, and I shared, the music with a lot of my coworkers and relatives. In my own way, I was spreading it around. But to be honest, Black people in the United States, this was like in the 70s, we were still, a lot of them were still trying to get stable. They were trying to get decent jobs. And the radio stations, I'm not sure. I don't want to say they weren't playing or promoting Bob Marley's music, but what I'm trying to say is that it may not have been a priority for people, Black people who were not in an economic position to have that enjoyment, to be able to relax and go to a concert or buy music that was not something that they were accustomed to, like the genre and things like that. Because on the radio back then, mostly everything was R&B, soul music. But it's not to say that they did not embrace it, okay? But some African Americans were not afforded the opportunity. They didn't have the funds to travel. And when you travel, that really broadens your horizons, and it gives you, like, I know for me, it gave me a hunger. The more you see, the more you want to see. The more you learn, the more you want to learn about the Caribbean and people that back in the 70s and the 60s, there weren't that many immigrants. There were not a lot of immigrants here in the United States like they are now. So at our high school, I can count like maybe 10 in the whole school were from the Caribbean. I don't think there were any from Africa, but just to show you how things have changed now, it's a completely different story. But back to Bob Marley and him not believing that we embrace his music. Bob, we still love your music, so many of us. And whatever tactics that were used by the people in the positions of power regarding getting tickets for that show at the Capitol Center, they affected us because I say that because they were ensuring that they were able to have good seats, the best seats. It was always with them, it was a thing about power and entitlement, I should say, because I mean, it's the truth. They had the means, they had the connections to just, I guess, God knows how many strips or hundreds or thousands of tickets that they got. We, just the regular Joe, we'd have a chance against that. I mean, we were happy to see Bob Marley in concert and see him in a better venue than, like, say, the McDonough Gym, but we didn't have the opportunity to have good choice seats on the floor.